Within the mountain ranges of South America, in the majestic and ancient Andes, there is a unique foreign settlement that emerged as a result of an unexpected and rapid development of trade connections, driven by a surprising discovery: the extraction of a rare and highly valuable metal, silver, buried deep within the subsoil of one of the Andean peaks. This settlement appeared at the end of the 16th century, specifically in the year 1051. Initially, it existed as a small trading outpost, but over time it grew into the center of a large and prosperous trade network. Because the silver found there soon began to find buyers thousands of miles away from this remote location. And if the distance was about 11,000 miles, nearly a whole world apart, the market was so vast and well developed that the metal found its consumers all over the globe. At that time, the Emperor of China, ruler of a powerful and ancient empire with immense authority over vast lands and peoples, decided that his subjects should pay taxes specifically in silver. This idea generated an incredible demand for silver within the Celestial Empire. So much so that it started to appear as if this metal had become more valuable than gold, especially in the eyes of Chinese merchants and rulers. This situation ushered in a golden age for silver. It became the most precious and coveted metal, defining the level of wealth and power of the state. This series or narrative recounts how the world changed after the King of Spain, a ruler of immense power and influence, agreed to fulfill the Chinese emperor's demands by sending large shipments of silver there. This move marked the beginning of a new era, which forever altered the balance of power and trade relations. As a result, just over 400 years later, China largely became the dominant global force, entering an age of globalization, a time when the entire world first became part of a single, interconnected trade network. A key element of this international system was silver itself. The metal became a powerful tool, enabling Chinese emperors to strengthen their authority and transform the country into one of the key geopolitical powers on the planet. Thanks to the mining, processing, and trade of silver, China transformed into the center of the world's economy and culture of that era. And one of the greatest entrepreneurs of that time, who amassed colossal wealth through silver, became one of the most famous and influential people of his age. He not only acquired enough wealth to finance a significant part of the Industrial Revolution in America, but also became a symbol of a new era of development. Artisans living in China continued to create astonishing silverworks, gradually elevating them to the level of unparalleled art and beauty. These products enjoyed great demand and were valued worldwide for their exquisite design and craftsmanship. By the 15th century, people admired this incredible world, where a thin wire made of silver could be the thickness of a human hair, and at the same time exemplify the flawless craftsmanship of Chinese artisans. Numerous trading caravans and ships transported silver from China to various parts of the globe, and thanks to this trade, large cities around the world grew and developed, from Boston and Seville to Hong Kong and Shanghai. However, at the same time, the mass trade in silver brought its dark sides. It sowed the seeds that led to the decline of one of the oldest states, China. Western powers decided it was time to stop this flow of silver and directed their efforts toward fueling military conflicts. As a result, China, once a mighty empire, was drawn into an era later called the Century of Humiliation. During this period, the country lost control over its external relations and economic issues, yet it completely refused to give up its thirst for silver, which remained one of the most important elements of Chinese culture and worldview. The influence of silver on Chinese history was so profound that its almost religious veneration was reflected in various aspects of culture and customs. In particular, silver symbolized wealth, prosperity, and status. This metal was associated in cultural traditions with riches, success, and flourishing, and its role in the country's history only grew stronger over time. Discussions of this influence become especially significant when looking at the present day. One of the brightest symbols of China's development over the last 4 decades is the metropolis of Shanghai, a colossal city, the pinnacle of modern Chinese progress and a symbol of the country's rapid advancement. Over these 40 years, China has traveled a long development path and now ranks second in the world in terms of national economy. There are good reasons to believe that soon it will surpass even its biggest competitor and become the undisputed leader. However, the idea that China remains at the center of global trade and that its influence extends far beyond its borders is not at all new. Nearly 250 years ago, in the 10th century, China was the largest and most powerful empire, possessing a high level of culture, science, and economy. The rulers of that time, particularly Emperor Chenglo, were renowned for their architectural achievements, complex palaces, and magnificent halls decorated with numerous elements of luxury and grandeur. Undoubtedly, Emperor Chenglo was one of the wealthiest and most influential rulers of his era. Due to high demand for Chinese porcelain, fine silk, and silverware, the state held leading positions in world trade. These goods became sources of pride and symbols of wealth. People were willing to pay generously in silver, the only metallurgical commodity China needed for its purposes, thus reinforcing the country's dependency on this resource. By the 15th century, China's dependence on silver had grown so strong that it became almost unbearably reliant on its influx and mutual trade. During the late Middle Ages and early modern period, monarchies of various countries sought new ways and opportunities to increase their wealth, expand influence, and strengthen their position within the global community. It was precisely at this time, towards the end of the 11th century, that the Chinese emperor, guided by strategic and economic interests, introduced a new taxation system based on silver. This tax required the population to make obligatory payments in silver coins or silver ingots, which stimulated the development of the silver industry and created the need to acquire this metal from abroad, since domestic reserves were clearly insufficient to meet the growing demands of the tax system. Consequently, despite its apparent simplicity, this approach created a complex system of relationships. To ensure tax payments, the country had to literally fill its warehouses with imported metal, which became an integral part of its economy. Especially when the demand for silver in China was so high that domestic supplies were simply inadequate. Extensive trade relations with foreign countries were developed, and suppliers on external markets were sought. As a result, a delicate balance between supply and demand emerged. A balance that was particularly fragile and sensitive during that era, requiring significant efforts to maintain it. This was especially true at the end of the 10th century, a time when China had a unique advantage. Its trading system functioned excellently thanks to a unique commodity that served as the center of international trade and became a symbol of the epoch: tea. During that period, tea became not just a drink, but a cultural phenomenon, almost a ritual, generating interest and winning the hearts of peoples from various nations. It is worth noting that at that time, China not only actively produced large quantities of tea, but also exported it to many countries around the world. Essentially, this was a unique product, unmatched by other nations in volume during that era. Indeed, no other country at the time could supply such quantities of tea beyond its borders, making China a global hub for this industry. Tea rapidly gained popularity, becoming not just a beverage, but also a cultural symbol of the new era. It penetrated homes, shaped new traditions, and influenced lifestyles. A particularly significant role in this process was played by Great Britain, which surpassed all other European countries in the level of the tea imports. An increasing amount of Chinese tea was shipped to the British market, with about 80% of it directed specifically to England. This volume constituted the main part of the export from the Chinese port located in Canton, reflecting the country's special status as the largest buyer and consumer of tea. Control over the import of this highly valuable product was exercised by a British company that held almost exclusive rights to its importation. This company, known as the East India Company, was not simply a trading enterprise. In fact, it became a semi-governmental body with broad powers to regulate and oversee trade. This was due to the fact that by the late 15th century, the East India Company already possessed its own army of about 90,000 men, as well as a powerful naval fleet of warships capable not only of protecting trade vessels, but also of controlling territories vital to its operations. As its sphere of influence expanded, it gained access to large regions of India, where it maintained close ties and received support from the mighty Mughal Empire, which added to its strength and capacity for successful business. The scale and scope of its activities made the East India Company not just a commercial intermediary, but a truly international player, backed by military force and political support. Despite the enormous revenues and successes associated with the export of tea and other goods, British merchants faced a very serious challenge. The foundation of all their trade with China was the need to find and introduce a product that would be of interest and demand precisely in China, so that British goods could compete or at least successfully complement Chinese products in the market. The British had certain advantages. They had cotton, and there was some industrial production, paper products. But choosing those goods that could significantly increase their share on the Chinese market was extremely difficult. The demand for Chinese tea was so high that British traders and policymakers could only acknowledge China's dominance in tea. A simple attempt to compete with Chinese products by importing other goods proved ineffective, and the entire situation led to a rapid devaluation of silver, which initially served as the currency as it flowed abroad in search of goods that could ensure a stable and profitable trade. During this period, China retained advantages and maintained dominance in exports thanks to its unique products. The situation changed in 1919 when the British government decided to intensify its efforts in Eastern markets and launched a large-scale trade expedition to China. The head of this mission was appointed the well-known statesman and diplomat, Lord George Macartney. This person was respected not only among political circles, but also among statesmen, and most people modestly regarded expectations regarding his ability to achieve positive results in negotiations with China, the largest and most powerful country of that time. An important letter has been preserved in one of the prestigious libraries in Britain, in which the main objective assigned to Lord Macartney is described in detail. The document indicated that he was to declare that by highlighting Britain's friendly and peace-loving intentions towards the Emperor of China, both countries could benefit greatly from further development of trade relations. According to the plan, as a result of these efforts, Britain aimed not only to expand its trade operations, but also to generate substantial income. Specifically, the document noted that establishing mutually beneficial trade relations could result in a turnover equivalent to approximately £250,000 at that time, solely from the sale of Chinese tea on the British market. At the same time, the British sought to persuade Emperor Qianlong not only of the necessity of exchanging tea supplies for British goods, but also, in the future, of concluding agreements for the provision of British trading posts and even land plots within China itself, which could significantly expand their business opportunities. The ideas of British diplomats at the time went far beyond simple commercial exchange. They hoped that by enticing the emperor with a multitude of advantageous proposals, they could secure the creation of permanent trading bases and perhaps even establish closer cooperation in simplifying trade procedures, which in turn would open additional horizons for British enterprises in the Chinese market. Today, when we strive to establish diplomatic relations and obtain permission to use a specific piece of land, or in rare cases, to own individual islands, we do not pursue the goal of strengthening defensive structures or creating powerful protective systems. Our primary aim is to ensure the safety of our trade routes and to protect our merchants and their agents, who become particularly vulnerable during their interactions with foreign governments. In this case, the Chinese government. We seek a strategically important yet modest agreement that would guarantee the safety of those involved in trade or travel and allow us to conduct business without fear of sudden obstacles or attacks. When our diplomatic envoy went to China, his mission was filled with hope and confidence in success. The optimism with which the British set out was understandable. Their belief in their strength and achievements was explained by the fact that England, for the first time in human history, had completed the entire process of industrialization, Part 6 of 28. This meant that the country had reached a high level of technological, economic, and military development, providing a solid reason to consider it equal to any major power, including China. The English no longer felt like newcomers, but like equal participants on the world stage, capable of competing and negotiating with everyone. In September 1902, Lord Macartney, representing the British Emperor, set out for China with an expedition of 3 ships, which included both military vessels and transport ships. He was accompanied by translators, cultural experts, musicians, and an orchestra, richly equipped with a variety of concert programs and bright decorations. Generously decorated gifts accompanied them on the journey. Among them were musical clocks and other interesting items intended to impress the Chinese elite. The main goal of this trip was not merely to demonstrate grandeur, but to seek recognition of the British state in China, and additionally, to obtain official permission to establish a permanent embassy at the imperial court in Beijing, which would have been an important milestone in the diplomatic relations between the two countries. It is worth noting that Lord Macartney arrived in China in July 1793, hoping for a prompt meeting with the emperor. However, as it later turned out, such a meeting proved impossible, because at that time, the mighty ruler, Emperor Qianlong, had moved his residence not to the capital city, but to distant Chengdu, located about 200 miles north of the Great Wall of China. A year had passed since the English diplomat left England, and the encounter he hoped for had not materialized. Macartney was still waiting for an invitation for a personal audience with the greatest ruler of his era, the Emperor, who had reigned for almost 50 years and held the throne for over 80. This individual was one of the most renowned and influential monarchs in Chinese history, not only because he expanded China's borders into Central Asia through numerous successful wars and conquests, but also because of his intellect and political skill. Macartney was proud of his achievements and hoped that soon he would be granted an audience, and that his delegation could represent Britain's interests. Emperor Qianlong received ambassadors not in the usual palace chambers, but in specially prepared tents. This was part of an established tradition. Each envoy had to present their gifts, kneel, and bow their head to the ground 9 times, symbolizing the emperor's grandeur and unbeatable power. This custom amazed Western representatives, but Macartney did not oppose the local culture. Showing respect for the traditions, he bowed on one knee when presenting his gifts as a sign of special reverence. Among them was a unique planetarium created by a young artist named William Alexander, who was part of the English embassy. This complex astronomical mechanism was designed to demonstrate the knowledge of English science and technological thought. It made a strong impression, as reports from Jesuit missionaries indicated that China itself had a deep interest in astronomy and star observation. An important role was also played by a gold casket, entirely made of gold and inlaid with diamonds, which served not only as a gift, but also as a symbol of Britain's wealth and power. Accompanying the gifts was a diplomatic and commercial message, a letter from King George II to the Emperor, expressing hope for successful trade ventures and the development of bilateral relations. During the exchange of courtesies, The dialogue set a tone of politeness and mutual respect, creating the impression that even at such an important and venerable event, everything was conducted within the framework of protocol and tradition. It is particularly noteworthy that among the members of the English delegation was a young son of the British vice envoy, distinguished by his extraordinary intelligence and courtesy. During the long journey, this boy managed to learn Mandarin, a very difficult language for non-native speakers. His diligence and high intellect became apparent to all. However, despite his high level of preparation and respect for the customs, these circumstances proved insufficient to achieve the intended goals. Ultimately, despite all efforts, the outcome of the negotiations remained unclear, highlighting the complexity and difficulty of bilateral diplomatic relations at that time. The letter sent by George to Emperor Tianlun was carefully translated and analyzed, and the Chinese ruler's response proved to be unprecedentedly dismissive and cold. In simple but expressive words, the emperor concluded his message with a phrase that later became widely known and frequently cited as a vivid testimony to imperial distrust and distancing. The administration of our vast and diverse empire has no need for goods from other countries. Such a response was a form of diplomatic rudeness, clearly indicating that China at that time did not pursue goals related to open trade or closer ties with Western powers. In this context, it was emphasized that the British diplomatic mission failed to achieve any significant progress. It suffered a complete and unequivocal defeat. By that time, the imperial stability and status of China were perceived as very high. In the eyes of his subjects, the authority of Emperor Tianlun was based not only on formal titulary frameworks, but also on a spiritual and symbolic role, as if he were a son of heaven. This was a crucial element of statehood and culture, reinforcing the ruler's authority. At the same time, in Cheng's mind, the oldest, most respected and influential diplomat and statesman, the King George II of Great Britain was merely considered a vassal ruler, a military vassal authority who should submit to and respect Chinese superiority. Unfortunately, over time, Qing dynasty rulers became increasingly overconfident and overly self-assured politicians, which often led to underestimating their opponents and making wrong decisions. Cheng was deeply convinced of his knowledge and of how many great emperors in Chinese history had managed to govern the country while maintaining its position in the global geopolitical arena. Although he and his advisors were aware of the power and strength of the West, he still believed that China was the center of the world and that its superiority should remain unchallenged. In particular, the partisan King Qining, who at that time rightly called himself the ruler of the entire world, refused to comply with any British demands and sent a clear and unequivocal signal about possible consequences. He warned that any attempts by British ships to conduct trade beyond Canton, either to sell their goods or to seek profit, would be met with force. Canton, being the only port on the entire Chinese coast open to foreign trade at that time, had to remain closed to outsiders, and any attempts to violate this rule threatened severe consequences. On the return journey by land, Cheng ordered the collection of Qing armed forces along the entire route extending southward. This demonstration of military strength was meant to show the British that China was capable and ready to defend its interests, to contain any external threats through its power. This was not only a desire to clear the borders of potential violators, but also a message that the state was far from defenseless and would not surrender its supremacy. It should be noted that Emperor Qining and his senior advisors, as well as ministers and field commanders, possessed substantial diplomatic skills and political acumen. These individuals understood that Europe, and primarily Britain, was a powerful and strategically significant force that could not be ignored. Although they lacked deep knowledge of European politics and modern technological developments, they were well aware that Britain had powerful ships armed and capable of operating in diverse conditions. Their plan was to avoid conflicts that could lead to devastating consequences for both sides and to retain the ability to reject unacceptable demands through displays of strength and diplomatic patience. The strength demonstrated by Cheng was not aimed at provoking, but rather served as a means of internal and external policy to maintain the status quo and contain the impending threat. All of this collectively helped maintain stability in the region and achieve goals, at least for the time being. In the end, this tactic proved successful. McCart, a British diplomat and trader, returned home empty-handed, thoroughly disillusioned. Public opinion in England regarding the situation in China began to shift from genuine excitement and admiration, bordering on intellectual fascination, to a more critical perception. Society developed the view that China was a despotic and backward country, and its ruler, a weak and humiliated monarch. In popular press and satirical cartoons, the Tianlun ruler was increasingly mocked as a symbol of an aging, outdated, and unreformable state. As was typical for that time, a significant shift occurred. Previous enthusiasm for Chinese culture and political system was replaced by skepticism and a more critical attitude, which could be described more as an intellectual fascination than a sincere belief in the might of the East. All of this was supported by reports from those who visited China and offered candid descriptions of the real situation, revealing nuances hidden behind the glossy exterior of the Middle Kingdom Empire. McCart expressed that the ship he paid attention to was an old, magnificently built warship that had long fallen out of use and was essentially headed for the scrap heap of floating ice. In his view, the situation could have been changed with help from the British government if his proposal had been heard and accepted, despite the negative reaction that manifested in Chentling. However, even with all efforts and the possibility of changing the situation, Britain was forced to accept the conditions set by China, since at the very beginning of the 19th century, when the era of new opportunities and great discoveries was still called, in the most important and largest trading hub on the planet, Canton, one could still make large fortunes. Most of the tea, silk, and porcelain shipments went there, which were not only commodities, but also symbols of luxury and prestige. A large amount of the world's silver was pouring into this port, intended to pay for these refined goods. Thanks to trade with the West, Canton, a tiny and remote corner of the vast Chinese Empire, became a true center of the world economy and one of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan cities on the planet. This was Canton's golden age, when it transformed into the heart of international trade, gathering under its roof representatives of peoples and cultures from all over the world. People in bright costumes and speaking different languages exchanged goods, celebrating their diversity and cultural richness. Among these were such commodities as tea, silver, porcelain, and silk, main symbols of this era, which not only filled warehouses, but also wrote pages of history. In fact, this city was one of the most bustling and populous centers of its time, attracting people from all corners of the country and even beyond, who came to pursue their own trades, conduct commerce, and create or sometimes profit from the production of various goods. In this context, Canton not only served as a major trading hub, a center for exchanging goods and forging commercial ties, but also was a very important place where a wide variety of items were produced, crafted masterpieces and artisanal works that were in demand both within the country and abroad. This large city had transformed into a true global workshop, where thousands of skilled artisans, highly trained and talented, processed local materials and created products adapted to the specific demands of foreign markets, with the potential for significant profit. Over the centuries, China evolved into a sort of factory, offering a broad range of goods while maintaining a high level of quality and craftsmanship that attracted steady customers from all over the world. By the end of the 9th century, when Europe began to face significant difficulties in producing its own high-quality items and lost its dominance in this area, it found itself relying on China as the sole source of goods capable of meeting its demands. Under these conditions, as Chinese artisans and manufacturing facilities possessed the necessary skill level and production volumes, trade between East and West started to grow increasingly extensive. A particular advantage of Chinese trade was its diverse array of producers and workshops, specializing, for example, in the creation of various household items and utensils, such as spoons, culinary spoons, and tools. Perhaps the Chinese officials themselves could not have imagined how astonishing such large spoons would seem to foreign buyers, as they were used both for rice and soup. They might have been told that these were called punchluk, a special spoon with an unusual shape and functionality, which would seem very exotic and unusual to the Chinese. Likewise, the images, designs, and motifs decorating the items would be perceived by Western travelers and traders as something very peculiar, sparking interest and confusion. It is no coincidence that Canton was renowned for its craftsmanship traditions, which reflected not only within China, but also in foreign lands, where products from this city were sold everywhere. Thousands of workshops produced silverware, fulfilling large orders for foreign markets, often selecting designs and decorations to best suit the tastes and preferences of international clients. However, unfortunately, most contemporaries or researchers living outside China only had a vague and blurry idea of how rich and diverse this craft center was. China remained a mysterious land for many, not visible to everyone at the time. Most people knew about it only through legends, rumors, and rare travel stories. Nevertheless, interest in China persisted, especially among those who had the opportunity to immerse themselves in its culture, visit cafes characteristic of this marvelous and mysterious land. It is worth noting that such establishments did not always reflect the true picture of life in China. They more often created mythological, fairy tale landscapes filled with fantastical creatures, unusual scenes and symbols, representing an artistic space that evoked wonder and amazement among visitors. In these cafes, scenes with numerous weather appearances, boats, and blooming plums could be seen, adding charm and romance to the atmosphere. Particularly captivating were unusual objects, such as a pen in the shape of a dragon, which was unlikely to have appeared on cutlery or silverware found in cities like London or Philadelphia. This pen featured a special design that highlighted the skill and taste of Chinese craftsmen. It served as a vivid symbol that the item was made in China and belonged to folk artisans whose work was renowned for its precision and artistic finesse. Craftsmen from Canton workshops did not limit themselves to simple silverware. They also selected and crafted their works to imitate Western classical style and aesthetics as closely as possible. For example, one could order a spoon from a Chinese master that was almost indistinguishable from a typical 19th century dining spoon widely used in Europe, but the price for such a spoon was significantly lower than the Western version. These items made in the 1830s were labor-intensive and precise, and both spoons, one produced in Scotland and the other in China, looked very similar, demonstrating the high craftsmanship and skill of Chinese artisans. In the 20th century, a similar picture emerged when comparing silver coins. One was minted in Oldenburg, and the other in Guangzhou, China. Although both coins appeared nearly identical, they were expected to be approximately equal in value. The gold content was the same, but the labor involved in creating them was much cheaper in China, making the products more accessible and profitable for exporters. In the 20th century, people frequently thought about mass production and how goods became significantly more affordable. This process closely resembled the situation that existed in the 10th century, when China was transforming into a dynamic and rapidly developing center of industry and international trade. At that time, the modern concept of global commerce was emerging, based precisely on mass production and the accessibility of goods to broad segments of the population. Nevertheless, Western merchants and traders faced certain challenges. They had to overcome language barriers, logistical difficulties, and some cultural peculiarities in order to successfully conduct their business and maintain their positions in this new market for them. In the early 20th century, when specialized language schools or business academies capable of helping entrepreneurs overcome cultural and linguistic barriers did not yet exist, trade was a much more complex and intricate activity. At that time, global commerce was in its infancy, and opportunities for international interaction were limited by the lack of systematic knowledge and clear rules. In such a situation, each trader had to confront numerous problems related to understanding foreign traditions, customs, and, of course, language differences. It was an era when the world appeared much more unpredictable and complicated to Western businessmen than it does today. This was especially evident in regions where Western representatives first encountered local conditions and business practices. One such enigmatic location, shrouded in many secrets and legends, was an area known as Canton, situated in the very heart of China. The history of this place is filled with many undisclosed secrets, and many storylines are connected to its unique destiny and multifaceted features. Today, however, this district is concealed beneath a vast gray expanse of concrete and steel from modern skyscraper landscapes, forever altering its appearance. Nonetheless, inside this city, one can still find remarkable exhibits, paintings that capture the atmosphere of that time and tell stories about the lives of Western entrepreneurs who embarked on trading in those distant eras. The lives of traders operating in the district, formerly called Canton, were strictly regulated by numerous rules and restrictions. They had access only to a narrow coastal strip about 300 meters long, where they were permitted to conduct business activities. This limited stretch of coastline was their sole arena for carrying out trade operations. Such restrictions made their lives extremely dull and monotonous, as they were deprived of the freedom to engage in physical activity or travel to broader areas of the city. Photographs from that era clearly show 4 men who were traders rowing boats on the water, possibly one of the few ways to find privacy or take a brief break from their strict regulations. Their only entertainment was occasional trips to flowering gardens or excursions to temple complexes located on the other side of the river, which allowed them to temporarily escape the monotony of everyday life. This small coastal area, remote from the city walls and the closed district, became known as the site of the so-called 13 factories. The buildings here looked quite unusual. They did not adhere to the typical Chinese architectural style, as Western entrepreneurs were permitted to incorporate their own design features, altering facades, interiors, and the overall appearance of the structures at their discretion. In this way, these factories represented a tiny European enclave within China, creating conditions for trade with the Western world while maintaining a certain level of exclusivity. Photos reveal a splendid garden, situated to the right of one of the British factories, as well as the Canton Administration Building, an institution that regulated and controlled many aspects of the life of this trading community. This garden aroused suspicion and wariness among locals because it was markedly different from traditional Chinese gardens in its layout and plantings. It subtly hinted that foreigners, particularly the British, intended to stay in this area for a long time, potentially establishing their own colonial structures. Such a development did not go unnoticed by the local residents, as any signs of foreigners settling in the region were perceived more as threats to their sovereignty and future growth. In addition to geographical and architectural features, traders faced strict restrictions in their daily lives. They were forbidden to learn the Chinese language or to establish close contacts with the local population, which made their lives isolated and detached. There was also a strict prohibition on appearing in public with women, including their own wives. Qing dynasty laws were harsh and required foreign traders to submit to local authorities to avoid unwanted contacts and issues. Arriving in China, traders often accumulated wealth quickly through their efforts and practices, which was also prompted by circumstances. Riches and success promised significant opportunities for material and social advancement. Consequently, such individuals were willing to endure strict and often harsh rules just to implement their business plans and achieve prosperity in what was called the Golden Ghetto, a narrow, isolated district where their trading activities took place. Despite numerous restrictions, traders found ways to enjoy certain privileges. They valued the fine wines and delicious dishes for which Chinese cuisine was renowned, eager to try all traditional foods and beverages available in local establishments. Part 14 of 28. Visiting public houses and participating in local festivities became a sort of entertainment for them and an opportunity to immerse themselves briefly in the local cultural atmosphere, even within limited confines. Their acquaintances, connections, and friendships often extended beyond business purposes, turning into a genuine network of mutual support and relationships. Overall, the traders had little reason to complain about their fate, as they found numerous pleasant moments despite the harsh environment. American diplomat Gideon Ney, who lived in China at the time, described his life in this area and recalled a festive event he attended where one of the most famous British traders named Jordan was present. At this event, events unfolded that seemed almost unbelievable by Cantonese standards. Mr. Jordan, together with Mr. Wetmar, dared to dance a waltz to a simple yet very touching African-American melody. However, the most serious restriction imposed on foreign traders by the imperial authorities was the strict decree limiting the import of a specific list of goods. For foreign businessmen working in Canton, there was no freedom of choice in selecting partners or product ranges. They were instructed to cooperate exclusively with one of the 8 or 12 trusted Hun traders who had been appointed and held the special trust of the Qing dynasty. These Hun traders had authority over all international trade within the entire Chinese empire, and all activities of foreign entrepreneurs had to operate within these strict rules and regulations. In a world filled with numerous traders vying for their place in the market, there exists a special figure who stands out among his colleagues as one of the brightest and most significant in Chinese history. Among those who build reputations and leave marks on world trade, one person is particularly remarkable. His name has become a symbol of enterprise and business genius. Born in the same year as the famous French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte and the Duke of Wellington, this Chinese merchant was born during a time of great global changes, when the economy and trade were rapidly developing, reaching new horizons. He grew up during the period when China began playing an increasingly important role on the international stage, and it was precisely during this time that his life and career started to acquire a distinctive dynamism. Thanks to his determination and ability to stand up for himself, he reached incredible heights, which, according to contemporary estimates, made him one of the wealthiest men in the world. His name was Hokwa, and despite his short stature, there was no hint of modesty or weakness in his demeanor. On the contrary, he was a bold, energetic, and enterprising individual, seemingly ready for any challenge. At the beginning of the 19th century, he resided in the port of Canton, one of the largest and most important centers of global trade at that time. During these challenging years, when language barriers and cultural differences hampered the development of relationships, Hokwa skillfully navigated the complex international trade, demonstrating both caution and bravery. He managed to conduct active commercial operations, primarily involving the supply of tea to English buyers, and through these dealings, he was able to accumulate enormous wealth. His successes were not limited to sales alone. He became the owner of colossal riches in the form of silver bars stored in his own vaults. Modern estimates of his fortune suggest an amount exceeding $1 billion. Some believe this amount surpasses the wealth of elite European families, such as the Rothschilds, who lived at that time. Throughout many years of his business activities, especially following the rise of the East India Companies, Hoekver achieved not only impressive profits, but also stable income, allowing him to feel confident and independent. His financial position enabled him to undertake large-scale trading operations and to accumulate savings that grew ever more substantial. But the question arises, where did all that incredible silver go? Hoekver had his own storage, an exclusive place where he kept his savings and valuables, and stories about his riches are filled with strange and even amusing incidents. One such story is linked to a fire in Canton in the year 1822, when witnesses recount that rivers of silver flowed from his vaults as if a liquid were spilling, impossible to stop. This image was permanently etched in the memories of witnesses. An enormous amount of silver seemed to spill out and scatter through the streets. When he was just beginning his journey, Hoekver understood that it was important not only to concentrate wealth in his hands, but also to invest it wisely and multiply it. Therefore, he decided not to keep his money in a single place, only in his own vault, but to invest significant funds in trading enterprises. He invested around £10 million into the East India Company, which was then one of the largest in the Asia-Pacific region, as well as in partners, traders from Canton, strengthening his position and expanding business ties. However, such scale and concentration of wealth caused him concern. He was well aware that keeping all his money in one place and in one form was risky, especially considering potential abuses by officials eager for easy gains and hostile factors that could impede his affairs at any moment. Therefore, he decided to ensure the safety of his savings by placing them elsewhere, in a more secure location. He earned this money through his trading operations with Chinese goods, tea, which was in great demand in Europe and England. As a result, he became not only a successful international merchant, but also a prominent participant in the global financial market, capable of managing his assets wisely and investing his funds profitably. Although he achieved success very quickly, his mindset was far ahead of his time. He understood that too strong a dependence on a single major client, the East India Company, could undermine his position. Therefore, he considered expanding and diversifying his business, looking into new markets such as America, which at that time was just beginning to establish its independence and represented a great opportunity for him. He viewed American merchants as potential partners who could help him enter this new economic reality, increase the scale of his trading operations, and strengthen his position on the global stage. In this regard, he also paid attention to the connections between British and American merchants, as these newly independent countries were becoming significant players in the world economy. Moreover, his interest was not limited to trade with the West. He aimed to establish ties with China as well, to reinforce his position in that part of the world, since China is an ancient country with a rich history and immense potential, and its connection with America only expanded opportunities for international trade. At a time when the history of the American states was only several decades old, peasants and businessmen had to consider their prospects within the framework of a new country driven by the desire to become part of global politics and economics. When American merchants traveled to China, they understood. By engaging with the ancient empire, they connected with a giant force that had been shaped over centuries. In a rich and prestigious district on the east coast of America, where luxurious mansions and elite neighborhoods are located, there is a house that holds a portrait symbolizing the great ancient Chinese dynasties, those that began their rise precisely through trade with the Western world. This portrait was brought by my great-grandfather, who was a well-known American merchant conducting business in China. His story and connection to this rich culture vividly illustrate how deep historical ties and business relationships can be preserved and passed down from generation to generation, serving as an example of true trade diplomacy and mutual enrichment. He achieved significant financial success in China, with the exact amount being known today only that he accumulated no less than 100,000 Spanish dollars. In current monetary terms, such an amount exceeds 20 million US dollars, substantial funds that played a crucial role in establishing one of the most influential dynasties in American history. It was precisely because of these riches that a family was formed, which later occupied a prominent place in American political and business elites. Oren Delon's grandson, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, renowned for his long and historic presidency, was connected to this family through his wealth and the influence it brought him. Warren Delon was known for his respectability in society, his honesty, punctuality, and strictness in business affairs. He consistently adhered to his principles, remained calm under emotional pressures, and his relationships with the residents of Boston were particularly warm and trusting. At certain moments, his American business partners had a unique opportunity to visit his luxurious residence in China, located in Canton. They received invitations to rare gatherings organized by Frank's great-great-grandfather, highlighting the close ties between the families and their historical continuity. Warren and his brother Edward always demonstrated excellent hospitality, ensuring that no guest went unnoticed. Today, we had the pleasure of enjoying a luxurious dinner that lasted about 4 hours. The table was set in the highest Chinese culinary style, and the menu included around 15 diverse dishes, among which the aromatic bird's nest soup and dishes with oysters held a special place. Fascinated by the flavors, we spent 3 hours savoring this exquisite meal, which left an unforgettable impression. The famous chef Holkua had not organized Chinese dinners at his home for many years, and perhaps had never hosted such events for friends and close ones before. Such lavish banquets undoubtedly strengthened his ties with the United States and made them closer. His relationships with the American business world were so strong that he entrusted part of his capital to his closest partners in America for investments on his behalf. These funds were invested at key moments in American history, underscoring his significant influence. It can be confidently stated that Holkua played a substantial role in supporting the construction and development of America by investing in railroads, factories, and coal mines. Thanks to his financing, a significant part of the American Industrial Revolution was realized, and his contribution to the country's economic development cannot be overstated. During the period of active industrialization, it was this Cantonese merchant living at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries who played an important role in financing and supporting progress. Currently, many alarming signals are being observed related to Chinese investments in the American economy. Many Americans are asking themselves, if the country's achieved economy is strongly influenced by China, has this not been a long-standing phenomenon? Indeed, over a century ago, trade with China already exerted a significant influence on American business and economic processes. Despite the fact that trade with China brought great wealth to Americans and created opportunities for development, business owners also faced certain difficulties. They found it hard to source goods that would genuinely interest the Chinese for purchase and exchange. American traders were reluctant to bring silver, the valuable currency of that time, into China, preferring to conduct trade mainly in goods. In other words, their activities were dominated by wholesale operations rather than simple retail trade. Initially, they attempted to trade women, as demand for them was noticeable, only for 1 or 2 seasons, but later shifted to furs from the Pacific Northwest, which also enjoyed popularity over several seasons. Over time, traders realized that it was silver that became the main and most vital element of their trade, and something more than just a medium of exchange played a role in its significance. It transformed into a key commodity that defined the nature of their activities, and without it, trade with China would have been unthinkable. Ultimately, they understood that silver had become a guiding and essential component of their commercial operations, prompting them to change their usual approaches and strategies. In the 10th century, Western traders, seeking to expand their commercial horizons, desperately searched for new goods capable of finding a market and bringing them significant profits in China. They took risks and overcame many obstacles, as China was a country rich in culture, strong traditions, and high demand for foreign goods. Compared to silver, which had long been an important commodity in exchange operations and trade, they discovered something far more attractive, a product of nature created by Mother Earth herself, tea, which had the potential to become popular. However, despite its seemingly harmless nature and botanical origin, what Western traders intended to offer the Chinese market was radically different. It was not about small batches of a luxury beverage, but about a powerful and forbidden drug. This substance, astonishingly altering the fates of millions and having a colossal impact on regional history, was opium, a dangerous and destructive narcotic that sadly entered the human agenda. Essentially, a potent chemical compound turned into a drug, opium became a shock to society, capturing attention to the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding before our eyes. This choice of product for trade and distribution proved to be fateful not only for individuals, but also for entire nations, altering the course of history. The trade in opium had a profound and multifaceted impact on China's economy, politics, society, and daily life. For foreign traders, doing business with the drug turned out to be highly profitable. They found a way to extract most of the profits while causing immense harm, depleting the country's resources, weakening its authority, and destroying social foundations. This profitable business brought considerable wealth to foreign merchants. However, its negative consequences for the Qing dynasty were catastrophic. During those years, despite all bans and the division of official prohibited lists, opium trade continued to expand and reached extraordinary proportions. In the first half of the 19th century, modernly speaking, an enormous amount of opium was illegally imported from India into China, thousands of chests. By 1838, this figure had grown nearly tenfold, reaching around 40,000 chests, which could shock even the most steadfast observers. If one looked more closely, it could be seen that among officials and members of the upper aristocracy during the Qing reign, there was likely some regular use of this harmful substance. High-ranking individuals sometimes, to ease their burdens, relax, or relieve tension, allowed themselves small doses of opium. Scholars and middle-class representatives often spent their leisure time smoking pipes and enjoying this peculiar relaxing ritual. It is quite possible that in special establishments or opium salons, they found a way to unwind or even alleviate their muscle pain. In turn, laborers and ordinary workers also went there, hoping to find relief from physical ailments that inevitably arose from harsh working conditions and exhaustion. The key players in this illegal opium trade on the continent were predominantly the British, who organized and developed their supply networks from India, the cradle of their vast and expanding empire. Growing large quantities of opium in rich, fertile regions like Bengal, these traders supplied the product to their companies, carefully organizing the entire process from cultivation to delivery. Most importantly, they had a product highly desired by the Chinese, not silver, silk, or ceramics, but opium itself, which had the capacity to provoke passion and addiction. By the mid-century, approaching the 1840s, demand for this commodity had reached new heights, and supplies continued to grow. These engaged in trade were able to see opium as more than just a profitable commodity. In the eyes of some, it was a means of relaxation and leisure. It was notable that some officials and high castes, observing the increasing demand, used the drug themselves to find brief relief from daily hardships or stress. Many perhaps longed for solitude and escape from the burdensome hustle of daily life. It is possible that in specialized salons or small shops for opium smokers, enthusiasts of the substance gathered, while ordinary workers sought relief for their muscles and nerves through moderate use. In other words, opium was transforming into a kind of social phenomenon, penetrating all layers of society, while simultaneously causing addiction and damaging health. The main sources of this sinister flow were primarily British merchants who cultivated vast opium plantations in Bengal, southern and the most valuable part of India. Remarkably, the British found a way to distinguish themselves from other market participants and present their business as licensed and legal. They did not see themselves as mere smugglers, but believed they played a legitimate role in the market. At the same time, in Britain, attitudes towards their activities were ambiguous. They often provoked outright contempt among many, especially during a period when discussions of morality and ethical norms were particularly prominent. Another well-known and prominent figure was William Jardine, an individual reputed to be a very powerful and influential trader, sometimes portrayed as literally formidable and incredibly wealthy. According to contemporary accounts and sources, he was a Scottish native, and his involvement in the opium trade attracted negative assessments not only from the public, but also from legislators. Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, described him as a terrible person who, in essence, became wealthy through illegal trade, as reports indicated that Jardine had millions of dollars in his pockets, and his reputation embodied the image of a man whose profits seemed to reach any imaginable bounds. He was accused in Russian and Western societies of conducting business that violated all moral and ethical standards, making him a symbol of the vices and immorality of that era. His name remains in history as an embodiment of an age when the pursuit of quick wealth, often at the expense of others' suffering, became a priority for some members of the business elite. The view of Jardine and Matson's company's activities is often simply seen as trade, just the supply of goods that the Chinese desperately wanted. This was the common perspective. Over time, this commercial activity began to attract envious glances from the opposing side, as the scale of trade and its value caused disapproval and even irritation among competitors and observers from other countries. In an era when the Atlantic was a boundary between great powers, more and more Americans could be found involved in illegal operations in this sector, including Chinese traders violating established rules. One of the prominent figures of this period was Thomas Perkins, respected in Boston society, and rightly considered one of the most influential and esteemed. He dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of profitable trade. He was especially troubled by the fact that British merchants were pushing him out of the opium trade, as this commodity brought in enormous profits. Without hiding his displeasure, he simultaneously felt a strong desire for healthy competition with the English, because he understood that the profits and the opportunity to strengthen his position depended on this rivalry. For him, the exchange of opium for tea held special significance, as it yielded a much greater income than simply acquiring silver and selling it later. Soon, Americans also began participating in this dangerous trade, despite it being prohibited. They gained access to opium through the Turan routes, via Turkish territory, which served as an intermediary. The number of crates containing this drug, transported illegally into China, began arriving in ever-increasing quantities, expanding rapidly. This dynamic caused serious social upheavals within China. The relentless growth of opium users who relied on the drug posed a significant threat to societal stability. The Qing authorities grew increasingly concerned as they observed how smoking and chewing opium undermined the health and moral standards of the population, especially among the broader masses. By the 1730s, the number of people affected by this addiction had reached 1 million, a colossal figure, considering that millions suffered from the harmful consequences of drug use. That is why the imperial court in Beijing had to reckon with the danger posed by this phenomenon. Emperor Dalikwan faced an urgent need to find a solution capable of halting the growth of addicts while also safeguarding the empire's wealth, particularly protecting the precious silver that was flowing out of the country through illegal trade networks. In March 1730, the emperor made a decisive decision to send the most honest and incorruptible official, renowned Commissioner Lin Sisu, to organize efforts against the illegal opium trade. His task was not only to stop the drug trafficking, but also to try to limit its spread within the country. Lin Sisu approached the task with rapid and resolute measures. First, he organized inspections at various sites. He demanded that all traders and drug users immediately surrender their opium stocks, which, by imperial decree, had been declared illegal. At the same time, the commissioner showed remarkable leniency. Those willing to cooperate were encouraged and promised assistance, rather than immediate punishment. Those who agreed to voluntarily abandon their dangerous cargo and did not resist could receive support rather than punishment. However, for those who refused to surrender their opium voluntarily or continued illegal trading, harsh punishment was swift and severe. During his operations, Lin Sisu arrested over 1,500 traders operating on Chinese territory and confiscated about 70,000 opium pipes, a huge stash that could have harmed thousands of people. After that, he demanded that British merchants engaged in the smuggling and storage of opium also hand over their chests containing the poison. However, despite his demands, the English traders refused to cooperate, which prompted decisive action from the Chinese authorities. The imperial forces then blocked the Pearl River, one of the main waterways used for smuggling, and placed foreign merchants under house arrest in their own residences. Their servants, who had previously been involved in preparing and transporting the drugs, were placed under control. Some of them even underwent training in new skills, for example, learning how to prepare opium, which shocked everyone. But Lin Sisu's focus was not solely on foreigners. He also took a series of measures against local merchants, especially against the traders from the largest market complex in Canton. Particular attention was given to the chief trader named Hokwa, who had long been under close surveillance due to his role in organizing and concealing large-scale smuggling networks. During the evaluation activities, both financial and administrative, and efforts to identify abuses, Hokwa and his family found themselves in a difficult situation. Throughout these tense confrontations, the threat of execution loomed, as the fight to rid the country of opium was conducted extremely harshly and decisively. Meanwhile, among the business circles involved in this controversial and dangerous trade was an American entrepreneur named Robert Bentley Forbes. He was known for his frank stance and curiosity about discussing the moral aspects and profitability of opium trading. In his letters to his wife, he openly reflected on how profitable this business was and what ethical dilemmas it posed to society. Thus, although official policies fought against illegal trade and promoted its prohibition, many different perspectives existed within the business community, and not all of them were unequivocally negative. The gradual increase in opium imports, led by an official named Kong, continued to gain momentum. Initially, local authorities saw this problem as quite distant, neither causing particular concern nor attracting much attention. However, the situation began to change rapidly when the volumes of illegal trade reached about 500 boxes, valued at approximately $15 million by today's standards. Such a scale represented a substantial financial flow that could no longer be ignored. Most often, opium was sold for cash, and there were practically no obstacles to doing so. These millions of dollars in cash created a real threat that became apparent to decision-makers. This enormous sum of money, effectively equivalent to the wealth of an entire state, provoked immediate reactions from the government. The authorities realized that immediate action was necessary to stop this dangerous and corrupt system, which was destroying people's mental health, undermining their physical well-being, and simultaneously depriving the country of significant revenue. While public outrage was low and moral protests were almost non-existent, the need for intervention was clear. The government understood that opium trafficking was not just a business, but a swift destructive process that required decisive measures. To break free from this chaos and restore normal conditions in the economy and society, the British authorities decided to eliminate the accumulated opium stocks, which posed a catastrophic threat to the nation and its people. In early March 1839, they issued an order for the public and final destruction of 20,000 chests of this dangerous drug. The process involved mixing the opium with water, thoroughly diluting it, and then dumping it into the open sea. This act symbolized the government's firm resolve to rid itself of the poison. Millions of pounds of the substance, which today's value would be comparable to a substantial sum, were washed away and dispersed into the ocean's depths. Those who issued such commands were often presented as noble and humanitarian figures. After some thought, they concluded that these measures were necessary because a vast amount of drugs was accumulating in waterways, allowing them to enter the natural environment. One such person even offered a prayer for all the fish inhabiting those waters, hoping that the silent inhabitants of the sea would survive the sudden and potent influx of drugs into their habitat. Following this, he wrote a message to Queen Victoria, fervently urging her to ban the trading of this poison, especially in China. In the letter, he emphasized, "While you continue to try to acquire it from the Chinese, you show indifference to the fate of others and ignore the immense harm you cause to the natural environment and society." In this message, he added, "Your Majesty, you must never allow this poison to exist again, either in the heavens or on earth." He was firmly convinced that his words would serve as guidance capable of awakening the foreign monarch's consciousness to the mistake made. He hoped that after this, British opium traders would cease their activities entirely. However, everything turned out differently. Instead of diverting from their lucrative and destructive pursuits, after the destruction of the opium, the British demanded compensation for the destroyed stocks. Disagreements and conflicts followed their refusal to pay. These misunderstandings and offenses were perceived as an unacceptable insult by the two leading opium traders in China, William Jardine and James Matheson. In response to the refusal of final compensation, representatives of these two entrepreneurs launched an active nationwide campaign, distributing brochures and appeals calling for decisive action capable of influencing Parliament. A firm conviction took hold that a brief, resolute, and powerful demonstration could compel China to recognize a new status quo, where Britain held a dominant position and its authority was considered unshakable. The British Foreign Secretary, Lord Palmerston, needed no additional arguments. His slogan was clear and resolute. He said, "Let's give China a good thrashing, and then we'll see." This motto embodied his entire confidence and firm intention. The world was determined to initiate a military campaign. And it did so. By June of 1840, the British fleet reached the borders of the Pearl River, a strategic waterway flowing through China. In response, China was prepared to defend itself, fortified with all necessary defenses, fortified positions, and prepared reserves. The Chinese government undertook extensive efforts to strengthen its coastline, preparing the territory near the seaward entrance for a possible external attack. However, the Chinese underestimated the ferocity and strength of the British assault. They did not fully realize that at the beginning of the 19th century, Britain still clung to its power and authority, remaining one of the strongest states on the planet despite all the upheavals of the era. Yes, it was a foreign attack, and yes, it affected China's sovereignty. But the Chinese leadership did not understand that the British Empire, despite its beginnings of change and internal difficulties, remained an imposing and formidable force. At the start of the 19th century, it continued to retain its strength, and its influence in many corners of the world made it a hostile power to be reckoned with. Long ago, during the era when Britain was still conquering the mysterious and enigmatic Eastern imperial power, China, it was forced to make concessions and present gifts, mollifying the mighty Chinese emperor. At that time, the Eastern ruler could calmly accept generous presents, hoping to preserve his power and prevent potential threats from foreign neighbors. However, over time, through continuous changes and events, this imperial Eastern world found itself on the brink of radical transformation. The English crown, which in the past had bowed to the Chinese supreme ruler in respect and submission, was able to choose a different path after years. Ultimately, Britain emerged victorious from the Napoleonic Wars and became a power that, despite its relatively small population, only 30 times smaller than China's, managed to impose its will upon the vast empire of the East. Now, the British government had the ability to earn annual revenues comparable in size to the wealth and taxes previously collected by the Chinese emperor himself. This new economic power and political confidence allowed Britain to turn its gaze toward imperial conquests and global ambitions. This transformation became especially evident when new warships appeared on the Chinese shores, capable of altering the balance of power in the region. The most significant and impressive of these were the gunboats, armed with cannons and equipped with coal engines. The first signs of a new technological era in naval warfare. These ships differed greatly from the old sailing vessels that dominated the seas about a century earlier, which were less maneuverable and less powerful. Technological development gave the British fleet a strategic and tactical advantage that they used not only for defense, but also for active offensive operations. Among these advancements, one of the largest and most modern battleships of the time, called Nemesis, played a special role. This ship became virtually the sole naval weapon capable of winning the Opium War single-handedly. It possessed an extraordinary ability to cut through winds, demonstrating exceptional maneuverability and the capacity to perform complex sea maneuvers that Chinese warships, primarily junks relying on traditional tactics and outdated approaches, could not match. Ultimately, this was a clear testament to England's technological superiority over China. Chinese ports were ruthlessly attacked by the British fleet, which used all its advantages, both in armament and maneuverability, to destroy and weaken resistance. The entire naval blockade and bombardments left the Chinese with a sense of inferiority. Their fleets were hopelessly outmatched in terms of technology and tactics by the British ships. During the war, British ships and artillery frequently went on the offensive, and as the conflict shifted to land, it became clear that the outcome of the struggle was predetermined. In December of the second year, after prolonged and intense fighting, both sides entered into diplomatic negotiations, resulting in the signing of a document known in history as the Treaty of Nanjing. This treaty became a crucial milestone because it reshaped the balance of power in the region and in the world as a whole. An exact copy of this document is kept in the UK archives, a testament to the moment when the world underwent significant change. Peace advocates and diplomats shared a common desire to end the long-standing misunderstandings and hostilities between the two countries. Both the Chinese emperor and the British queen signed this important act of treaty relations. Despite the warmth and friendliness conveyed in the wording, this treaty entailed many obligations for China and significant concessions. Specifically, it was stipulated that all British subjects and their families, as well as institutions located within the country, could reside and engage in activities without hindrance. An important part of the agreement was the opening of key ports such as Canton, now Guangzhou, Amoy, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, to British business, all of which gradually transformed into free trade centers. However, British demands proved to be far more serious and extensive. The Chinese emperor was forced to cede Hong Kong Island, transferring sovereignty to Britain on perpetual terms, with an obligation to administer the territory according to laws and regulations established by the Queen. For the first time in China's history, the emperor was compelled to give up part of his own territory under pressure from foreign armed forces, British warships. This set a historical precedent, since previously, the Chinese monarchy generally never made concessions under any circumstances, especially of such a scale. Renouncing land and recognizing another authority. The transfer of Hong Kong Island to Britain meant that a portion of Chinese land was effectively annexed and turned into a colony. This situation caused a great shock within the state, as the tactics of coercion and force became clearly evident. And judging by the events occurring at the end of the 20th century, Chinese military ships began appearing in the strait between the mainland and the island. They were likely heading toward the UAE island, which could have potentially led to the beginning of a new conflict. If people viewed the world through Chinese eyes, they might have understood how such actions could appear insulting, provoking feelings of humiliation and distrust. This complex historical confrontation reveals many nuances, demonstrating how the consequences of colonial and military decisions can reverberate for the fate of nations and states for many decades. I am convinced that the Nanjing Treaty can rightfully be called one of the most significant historical documents, reflecting pivotal events in China's destiny. It marks the beginning of a special era in the country's history, which greatly cemented the Chinese people's perception of their reality for many years to come. For an entire generation of this country, starting from the early 20th century, the Nanjing Treaty was often associated with an era of humiliation and loss, a period when the country was in the grip of external forces that imposed their conditions and rules of the game. At this time, China was compelled to sign agreements that essentially deprived it of the ability to define its own international position independently. Scholars and historians note that during these years, the country was dictated how to interact with the outside world, how to conduct negotiations, and how to manage its foreign policy. This document became a symbol of the loss of sovereignty and the inability to make independent decisions. In the collective memory of the people, the images of the humiliation experienced by the Chinese, these sufferings and defeats, left an indelible mark on their shared history. The defeat in the war and the signing of that treaty were perceived not only as military failures, but also as a collapse of national dignity. The scale of the catastrophe was so great that its consequences were felt not only at the state level, but also in the deep personal lives of individual citizens. China's fall was viewed as a civilizational disaster, characteristic of decline eras. This significant event marked the end of the golden age of Cantonese trade, a vibrant period of active international contacts, prosperity, and cultural exchange associated with a city that was once considered the center of global commerce. The decline of this era was accompanied by a gradual disappearance of the wealth and power that had once made the leading merchant, one of the wealthiest people in world history, famous. His name was Hawke. It remains known to this day, although his personal story largely faded into the shadows of time. He died at the age of 83, just 1 year after the end of the Opium War, an event that forever changed China's destiny. His son continued the family's military and commercial endeavors, hoping to preserve the family's wealth and connections. However, despite his efforts, the enormous fortune gradually depleted, and by our days, only memories of former wealth and a surname symbolizing past glory remained. Today, very little of Hawke's former magnificence has survived. This luxurious mansion and its picturesque gardens, Numerous photographs from earlier eras allow us to imagine how magnificent this house once was, but almost everything that once existed has disappeared over time. Conversely, modern Hong Kong's agglomeration has become a symbol of success and power for the victors of the Opium War. From a small, barren, rocky island off the southern Chinese Sea, it transformed into a strategically vital center of the British Empire, playing a significant role in shaping the global economy. Today, Hong Kong is a vivid example of rapid economic growth and dynamic development. At the heart of this metropolis thrived an imperial trading enterprise based on opium trade. Jordan's and Matheson's ventures became symbols of international commercial links and capitalist success. In less than 50 years, this trading fairy tale played a decisive role in China's loss of its status as a leading global power. The strength the country gained through trade, including opium, allowed it to dictate its terms and influence global trade processes. However, all this soon changed. Today's reality presents new challenges. The country faces the threat of a return to the disastrous catastrophe, where a resurgence in opium trading and the associated dangers could once again lead to a large-scale internal tragedy and armed conflict. The deliberate and profound destruction, which began with the destruction of the Summer Palace, one of the magnificent monuments of Chinese civilization, was not merely an act of vandalism or revenge by the victors, but seemingly a cruel punishment aimed at humiliating and undermining the authority of the Qing imperial court. This symbolic act marked the beginning of a series of new trials for the Chinese people and the nation. Subsequently, pressure from Western powers and Japan only intensified, leading various empires to seize Chinese territories in their quest to expand influence, thereby weakening China's independence. The days when China could govern its own destiny appeared fleeting. Despite all efforts and internal reforms, experts and historians predict that the worst was still ahead. Under the constant threat to the country's existence, there is a growing sense that its national community could be on the verge of extinction. The awareness of this impending crisis is so acute that many leaders and analysts believe that the danger facing China is not just a historical metaphor, but a real possibility requiring immediate action and deep reconsideration. Ultimately, it is about a potential threat that could challenge the very prospects of preserving the national identity and integrity of this great people.